Captain Drake of the Earth vessel Endurance observed the alien delegation with diplomatic caution. The Vex, as they called themselves, were tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that shimmered under the conference room lights. This was humanity's first contact with an advanced civilization, and the tension aboard the ship was palpable. "We welcome you to our quadrant," said Lore, the Vex ambassador. "Your species has shown remarkable ingenuity in achieving faster-than-light travel." Drake nodded, his military bearing evident even in this diplomatic setting. "We're explorers at heart. But we're also prepared for whatever we might encounter." The Vex exchanged glances with their compound eyes. Their translator devices worked perfectly, but something in Drake's tone seemed to disturb them. Over the next few days, the human crew and Vex delegates engaged in cultural exchange. The aliens were fascinated by human history, art, and technology. But when they accessed Earth's military archives, granted as a show of transparency, their demeanor changed dramatically. "Your species has been at war with itself for most of its recorded history," Lore asked, mandibles clicking in what the humans had learned was anxiety. "We've had our conflicts," Drake admitted, "but we've also achieved peace across most of Earth. Yet you still train for combat. Your bodies are hardened." Drake shrugged. "Standard procedure. Even in peacetime we maintain readiness." Lore's assistant Mev approached with a scanning device. "With permission, we would like to study human physiology more closely." The medical officer, Dr. Hill, volunteered. "I can explain our biology as you scan." What the Vex discovered sent ripples of concern through their delegation. Humans could function on minimal sleep for days. Their bodies could withstand tremendous physical punishment. Their cardiovascular system could maintain combat readiness for hours. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to develop increased strength under stress. "Your bodies are designed for sustained warfare," Lore finally concluded. "No," Dr. Hill corrected. "We're designed for survival. Earth has predators, natural disasters, extreme climates. We adapted." Later, in private communication with their homeworld, the Vex delegates sent an urgent message. "The humans are unlike any species we've encountered. Their bodies regenerate from injury at remarkable rates. Their skeletal structure can endure impacts that would shatter our exoskeletons. They refer to physical training as exercise or sports, but it mimics combat preparation. Most concerning, they seem unaware of how uniquely dangerous they are." The reply came swiftly. "Maintain diplomatic relations. Learn more. Consider them high threat potential. Do not provoke." Unknown to the Vex, their communications had been intercepted by Earth's intelligence officer Tom Reed. As he decoded their assessment of humanity, a slow smile spread across his face. He immediately scheduled a meeting with Captain Drake. "They're afraid of us," Reed explained, displaying the translated message. "Not because of our weapons or ships, but because of what we are." Drake frowned. "We came in peace, and we'll maintain that peace," Reed assured him. "But it's worth noting that, in a galaxy of unknown threats, being perceived as dangerous might not be a disadvantage." As the Endurance continued its mission with the Vex observers on board, the aliens watched the humans with new eyes, studying how they moved, how quickly they responded to simulated emergencies, how their bodies seemed built for endurance and recovery that the Vex could hardly comprehend. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, and their first impression was not one of technological superiority or cultural richness, but of a species unwittingly designed for war. The question that troubled the Vex was whether humans would recognize their own power, and how they would choose to use it. 6 months after first contact, humanity received an unexpected invitation. Participation in the Galactic Competitive Trials, a centuries-old tradition among the 17 known sentient species. "It's primarily athletic competition," explained Lore, now the official Vex ambassador to Earth. "Each species demonstrates their unique abilities. It promotes understanding and peaceful relations." What Lore didn't say was that the Vex High Council had specifically requested human participation to better assess their capabilities in a controlled environment. The Earth delegation arrived at the massive space station Harmony, where the trials were held every 12 Earth years. Captain Drake led a team of 8 humans selected for their diverse athletic abilities: runners, swimmers, climbers, and martial artists. The human competitors were immediately struck by the variety of alien life forms. The bulky Krell with their 4 powerful arms, the aquatic Murr, who moved with incredible grace in water, the insectoid Trill, who could coordinate in swarms with perfect precision. Remember, Drake briefed his team. We're here as ambassadors. First, competitors second. The first event was endurance running. Each species would run until exhaustion on standardized tracks adjusted for different physiologies. Jack Mason, Earth's marathon champion, took his position. The race began, and initially, several alien species outpaced him. The gazelle-like Lith moved with astonishing speed. But as hours passed, competitors began to drop out. By the 6th hour, only Mason and a Lith remained. By the 8th hour, Mason ran alone, his body covered in sweat but his pace steady. When he finally stopped at hour 12, the observation deck had filled with aliens from every delegation, watching in stunned silence. "Is something wrong?" Mason asked, breathing heavily but standing upright. "You were supposed to stop when tired," the Krell judge explained. "I am tired," Mason replied, "but I could keep going if needed." The swimming competition yielded similar results. Lisa Waters didn't have the speed of the Murr or the Amphids, but long after they had exhausted themselves, she continued with steady strokes. In climbing, Tom Beck didn't have the multiple limbs of the Krell or the adhesive pads of the Trill, but his tenacity and problem-solving allowed him to reach heights that astonished the observers. Between events, the human team noticed increasing whispers and stares. Other species began to avoid close contact. Even their Vex guides seemed more formal than before. "They're studying us," Reed observed during a private team meeting. "Every competition is a data point." "Data for what?" Waters asked. "To determine if we're a threat," Drake answered. "Remember that intercepted message? They think we're built for war." Beck laughed. "We're just athletes." "To us," Drake said. "But look around. No other species pushes through pain like we do. None recover as quickly between events. What we consider normal athletic performance, they see as military capability." The turning point came during the combat demonstration. Each species performed traditional martial arts or defensive techniques from their culture. When Jane Dixon demonstrated Earth karate and judo, the observation deck fell completely silent. Later, the human team overheard a conversation between 2 Krell officials, their translator devices picking up the exchange. The humans intentionally strike each other for practice. They call it sparring. Their young engage in this sparring too. They are conditioning from birth. That evening, Drake was approached by Grend, the Krell delegation leader, a massive 4-armed being whose species was considered among the physically strongest in the galaxy. "Your people are impressive," Grend rumbled. "But tell me, Captain Drake, honestly, is Earth preparing for galactic conquest?" Drake was momentarily speechless. Then he began to laugh, a reaction that only confused the alien further. "No," Drake finally managed. "We're just being human." As the trials continued, humanity's reputation grew, not as the most advanced or specialized species, but as the most adaptable, tenacious, and inexplicably durable. And the other species watched, with a mixture of admiration and unease. 1 year after the galactic trials, the emergency signal reached Earth's newly established diplomatic corps headquarters. The Vex colony on Proxima B was under attack by an unknown hostile force. As the nearest human outpost was only 3 light days away, Earth dispatched the military vessel Vigilant to investigate and potentially assist. Commander Alex Wells studied the briefing as his ship approached. Proxima B. The attackers were an unknown species dubbed the Swarm. Hive-minded insectoid creatures that had appeared without warning, overwhelming the Vex colony's defenses. "This is a reconnaissance and evacuation mission only," Wells reminded his crew. "We are not authorized to engage unless directly threatened." The Vigilant arrived to chaos. Swarm ships surrounded the planet, while desperate evacuation vessels attempted to break through the blockade. The Vex, for all their technological advancement, were being systematically destroyed. Wells made an immediate decision. Battle stations. "We're going to open an evacuation corridor." The human ship plunged into the fray, its advanced weapons targeting the swarm vessels with precision. A path opened, and Vex ships began to escape. On the planet's surface, the situation was dire. Wells led a rescue team to the main colony, where they found survivors barricaded in the central complex, surrounded by swarm warriors. "We need to reach them and establish a defense perimeter," Wells ordered. "Standard breach and clear, non-lethal takedowns when possible." What followed stunned the observing Vex. The human soldiers moved with a coordination and aggression that seemed impossible. Despite being outnumbered, they established a corridor to the survivors and began evacuation. Private Ryan, a young Marine, found himself separated from his unit when a swarm attack collapsed part of the building. Trapped with 3 Vex civilians, he set up a defensive position at a narrow corridor. For 6 hours, Ryan held that position alone, fighting off wave after wave of swarm attackers. When finally relieved by his unit, he had sustained multiple injuries but remained combat effective. "How?" asked Lore, who had been among the rescued civilians. "How did you continue fighting?" Ryan, bandaging a wound in his arm, looked confused. "It's my job, sir." Back aboard the Vigilant, as the rescued Vex received medical treatment, Wells noticed their scientific observers documenting everything about the human crew. How quickly they recovered from exertion, how they adapted to unexpected threats, how they functioned despite injuries that would incapacitate other species. Lore approached Wells privately. "Commander, my people have never witnessed such capacity for violence, yet so controlled. Your soldiers fought relentlessly but took care to minimize harm to themselves and others." "That's basic training," Wells replied. "Proportional response, tactical assessment, protection of civilians. For us, what your Private Ryan did would be physically impossible. His body should have shut down from stress and injury." Wells nodded thoughtfully. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. When necessary, we can override pain, fatigue, even some injuries. We call it pushing through." Reports of the human intervention at Proxima B spread quickly through galactic communications. The Vex, once wary of human physiology, now spoke of it with reluctant admiration. Other species began to approach Earth's diplomatic corps with military alliance proposals. In the Galactic Council, an emergency session was called. The topic: should humans be classified as a protected species due to their unique abilities, or restricted as a potential destabilizing force? Unknown to the humans, they had become the most intensely studied species in the galaxy. Not for their technology, which was relatively primitive, but for their bodies and minds, which seemed uniquely evolved for conflict in ways that both terrified and fascinated their new galactic neighbors. "An exchange program?" General Harris repeated, looking skeptical. "They want to send alien soldiers to train with us, and vice versa?" The proposal had come directly from the Galactic Council following the swarm incident. 5 species, the Vex, Krell, Lith, Trill, and Mare, had requested to send military observers to Earth, while hosting human soldiers on their respective worlds. "It's diplomatic," explained Ambassador Reed, formerly intelligence officer on the Endurance. "But yes, it's also about studying us. After what happened at Proxima B, they want to understand our military capabilities firsthand. And we agree. Because we need allies, sir. And because we need to understand them just as much." The exchange began a month later. 20 alien officers arrived at the Joint Military Training Facility in Colorado, while 20 human soldiers departed for various alien homeworlds. Major Ben Foster was assigned as liaison to the alien contingent. His first challenge was basic physical training, a standard part of Earth military routine that nearly broke the visiting officers. "This is daily practice?" gasped Turl, a Vex officer, after a 5-mile run that the humans considered light. "Exercise. 3 times a week," Foster confirmed. Today was an easy day. The differences became more pronounced in combat training. The aliens watched in horror as human soldiers sparred with each other, willingly taking hits to practice technique. "You allow yourselves to be injured, to prepare for potential injury?" asked Kroll, a massive Krell officer. "How else would we learn to fight through pain?" responded Sergeant Miller. In tactical exercises, the aliens demonstrated superior technology, and in some cases, natural abilities beyond human capacity. The Lith could move with blinding speed. The Trill could communicate silently across distances, and the Krell possessed strength that could bend metal. Yet in extended operations, particularly those involving sleep deprivation, limited resources, or adverse conditions, The humans consistently outperformed their alien counterparts. Your bodies don't seem to accept limitations, observed Mira, a Mer officer, after watching humans complete a 3-day survival exercise in the mountains with minimal supplies. We're taught to ignore limitations, Foster explained. The body will tell you to stop long before it actually needs to. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the human exchange officers were making similar discoveries. Lieutenant Emma Ward, stationed with the Vex military, sent back reports that their tactical doctrine emphasized technological solutions over physical endurance. Lieutenant James Cooper, with the Krell, noted their incredible strength but limited stamina. 3 months into the exchange, an unexpected emergency arose. A training mission in Alaska involving both human and alien officers was caught in a sudden blizzard. Cut off from base with communications jammed by the storm, the mixed species team faced a survival situation. We need to reach the emergency shelter, Foster told the group. It's 15 miles northwest. Impossible, stated Turl. In these conditions, with night approaching, we should conserve energy and wait for rescue. The storm will last at least 3 days, Foster countered. We don't have supplies to wait it out. What followed became legend in both human and alien military circles. Foster led the team through near-zero visibility conditions, with temperatures dropping to lethal levels. When Mira collapsed from cold, Sergeant Miller carried her for 4 miles. When their navigational equipment failed, Foster navigated by the brief glimpses of stars when the clouds parted. After 20 hours of continuous movement, they reached the shelter. The aliens were in various states of physical distress, but alive. The humans, though exhausted, immediately set about establishing security, medical care, and communication. When finally rescued 2 days later, the alien officers had a transformed understanding of human capabilities. You kept moving when biological shutdown was the only logical response, Turl told Foster as they recovered at base. Your species simply refuses to die. Foster shrugged. We call it determination. The military exchange concluded with a formal report to the Galactic Council. Its classified contents detailed the unique physical and psychological traits that made humans exceptional combatants, not through superior strength or speed, but through what one Krell officer described as a relentless refusal to acknowledge defeat, even when defeat is biologically indicated. Earth's status in galactic politics shifted subtly but significantly. They were now viewed as potential protectors rather than potential threats. The first attacks were subtle: communications outages in remote systems, supply ships disappearing, isolated outposts going silent. For months, the Galactic Council debated whether these were isolated incidents or coordinated actions. By the time they recognized the pattern, the enemy had already established footholds in a dozen systems. They called themselves the Void Collective, a species from beyond the galactic rim, with technology centuries beyond the Council races. Unlike the mindless swarm, they were calculating and patient, systematically dismantling defenses before revealing themselves. When the Collective finally launched open warfare, the Council races found themselves outmatched. The Vex fleet was decimated at Rigel. The Krell homeworld was blockaded. The Lith colonies fell one by one. In desperation, the Council turned to Earth. We request full military alliance, Lore told the United Earth government, his usual diplomatic poise replaced with urgent fear. The Collective's strategy targets species weaknesses. The Vex cannot sustain prolonged combat. The Krell require specific environmental conditions. The Lith depend on centralized command structures. Each of us has biological limitations they exploit. And humans? Asked President Wilson. You have no single point of failure, Lore replied. Your adaptability, your endurance, the very traits that once made us wary of you may now be the galaxy's best hope. Earth committed its full military resources to the conflict. Human strategists analyzed the Collective's tactics, identifying patterns where other races saw only chaos. Human ships, while technologically inferior, employed unpredictable battle maneuvers that confounded the Collective's prediction algorithms. But the true difference emerged in ground combat. When the Collective seized the crucial Vex mining colony on Tau Ceti, the Liberation Force consisted primarily of human Marines supported by Krell heavy units and Trill reconnaissance. Major Foster, now commanding the 3rd Special Combat Division, led the counter-invasion. His troops deployed using a tactic no other species had ever attempted, intentionally landing behind enemy lines and fighting their way toward their objectives rather than establishing a secure beachhead. The collective has never encountered an enemy that chooses to begin at a disadvantage, Foster explained to his alien colleagues. Their defensive patterns assume logical approaches. We'll do the opposite. For 3 weeks, human combat teams operated deep in enemy territory with minimal support. They slept in short rotations, ate cold rations, endured injuries that would have incapacitated other species, and kept fighting. The collective, accustomed to enemies who retreated when cut off or overwhelmed, had no protocol for an adversary that simply refused to stop advancing. Lieutenant Garcia's platoon became legendary during this campaign. Cut off from their extraction point, presumed dead by command, they continued their mission for 11 days beyond their projected survival window. They destroyed 7 critical collective installations before finally being extracted, carrying their wounded the entire time rather than leaving anyone behind. When debriefed, Garcia seemed puzzled by the attention. We had ammo, we had water, and we had a mission. Why would we stop? The Tau Ceti victory marked a turning point. The collective, for the first time, began to retreat from certain engagements. Analysis of their communication patterns suggested they were reevaluating their understanding of human physiology and psychology. In a captured collective database, Earth Intelligence discovered thousands of hours of footage analyzing human combat performance. The collective had been studying them obsessively, trying to identify their breaking point, the threshold of pain, exhaustion, or despair that would make them surrender. They hadn't found it. A collective commander, captured during the battle, for the Krell homeworld, revealed their growing fear. You don't fight like sentient beings. You continue when your bodies should fail. You advance when tactical logic demands retreat. The collective models cannot predict you because you operate beyond biological limits. As the tide of war gradually turned, humanity's role in the galactic community transformed. They were no longer the newcomers to be watched with caution, but the vanguard of the Allied forces, not because they had the best technology or natural abilities, but because they had what one Vex admiral called the unconquerable essence. Human. Military doctrine, once considered primitive by galactic standards, was now being studied and adapted by all council races. 3 years into the war against the Void Collective, Earth itself came under direct attack. A massive collective fleet bypassed the outer defense systems and established orbital positions around the planet. Their ultimatum was simple: surrender, or face extinction. The United Earth Defense Force mobilized everything: active military, reserves, and civilian volunteers. Every ship that could fly, every weapon that could fire, every person who could fight was called to service. Admiral Drake, commanding Earth's space defense from the flagship Defiance, faced an enemy fleet that outnumbered his forces 5-1. The tactical computers recommended immediate surrender to minimize casualties. Drake ignored them. All ships, combat spread. Initiate Operation Sunrise. Operation Sunrise was considered a desperate gamble, a simultaneous attack on all collective command ships regardless of the defensive screens protecting them. It meant guaranteed losses, suicide runs, and sacrificing ships to create openings for others. No other species in the Galactic Council would have attempted it. The casualties would be too high, the psychological impact too severe. But humanity had been pushed to its breaking point, and that breaking point was unlike anything the collective had encountered. As the battle raged in orbit, collective ground forces landed in key locations around the planet. In Washington, London, Beijing, Moscow, and a dozen other cities, humans fought building to building, street to street. Colonel Ward led the defense of Chicago with a hastily assembled force of regular Army, National Guard, and police officers. When the collective neutralized their advanced weapons with electromagnetic pulses, they switched to simple firearms. When ammunition ran low, they fought with whatever came to hand. For 7 days, Chicago held against an technologically superior enemy. The collective expected organized resistance to collapse after the first 48 hours. Instead, it intensified. In orbit, the human fleet was taking devastating losses, but continued to press its attack with increasing fury. Ship captains, their vessels crippled and weapons offline, ordered ramming maneuvers against collective cruisers. Crew members in damaged sections, exposed to vacuum but protected by emergency suits, continued to manually operate defensive systems until their oxygen ran out. The collective had anticipated human tenacity based on previous encounters. What they hadn't anticipated was how that tenacity would transform when humans were fighting for their homeworld. Aboard the collective command vessel, Supreme Director Warship reviewed the battle analytics with growing concern. Their resistance should have broken by now. The casualty rates they're sustaining are beyond what any rational species would accept. They don't respond to casualties like other species, his tactical officer replied. Each loss seems to strengthen the resolve of those remaining. On the 6th day of the battle, with the outcome still uncertain, reinforcements arrived. Not just the expected Council forces, but ships from every species humanity had encountered. The Vex, the Krell, the Lith, the Trill, the Mur, and a dozen others formed a united front unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Leading them was General Ben Foster, now the Supreme Allied Commander. His message to Earth was brief. We stand together. The combined fleet hit the collective from behind, catching them in a devastating crossfire. On the ground, alien troops deployed alongside human defenders, bringing their unique abilities to the battle. Warship, recognizing the shifting tide, ordered a fighting retreat. Nearly half the collective invasion force was lost in the withdrawal, unable to match the ferocity of the counterattack. In the aftermath, as Earth began to rebuild, the galactic community witnessed something they had never seen in humanity before. Not weariness, not broken spirits, but a grim determination that seemed to have only hardened through adversity. We expected to find your breaking point, Lore told President Wilson during the victory ceremony. Every species has one, the threshold of suffering beyond which they cannot continue. And did you find ours? Wilson asked. Lore's compound eyes shifted in what humans had learned was their expression of respect. We found only that it exists far beyond what we imagined possible. Your soldiers fought until they physically could not stand. Your civilians turned their homes into fortresses. Your leaders refused options that would have saved lives at the cost of surrender. That's humanity, Wilson said simply. We endure. As the rebuilding began, educational and scientific exchanges between Earth and the Council races intensified. The other species sought to understand the biological and psychological foundations of human resilience, hoping to cultivate similar traits in their own populations. And humanity, having faced extinction, embraced its new role in the galaxy. Not conquerors, not saviors, but protectors who had demonstrated that they would pay any price to defend not just their own world, but any world they called ally. 10 years after the Battle of Earth, the galactic landscape had transformed. The Void Collective, though not destroyed, had been pushed back beyond the rim, and contained by an alliance unprecedented in galactic history. At the center of this alliance stood humanity, not as rulers, but as the steel spine that gave the coalition its strength. Human military advisors served with every council species. Human diplomatic corps maintained the complex network of relationships that kept former rivals working together. Human medical science had begun to unlock the genetic foundations of their unique resilience, offering insights that benefited all species. On the 10th anniversary of the victory, representatives from all allied races gathered on Earth for the dedication of the Unity Memorial in what had once been war-torn Chicago. The massive structure honored the fallen of all species, its central pillar bearing a simple inscription, "Together we endure." Admiral Drake, now retired but still revered across the galaxy, gave the keynote address to an audience that included everything from the massive Krell to the ethereal Lith, from the insectoid Trill to the aquatic Mur, all seated alongside human dignitaries. 10 years ago, we faced annihilation, Drake began. Not just humans, but all sentient life in this galaxy. We prevailed not because any one species was stronger or smarter than our enemy, but because we finally understood that our differences were our greatest strength. As he spoke, Drake reflected on how far they had come. The Vex, once cautious of humanity's capacity for violence, now sent their children to Earth universities to study human philosophy and art. The Krell, who had respected only raw strength, now admired human ingenuity and adaptability. The collective believed they could exploit our biological limitations, Drake continued. What they failed to understand was that limitations exist to be overcome, Humans have always known this. Our entire history is the story of pushing boundaries, of gravity, of distance, of the possible. What the war taught us is that we are not alone in this potential. Every species represented here today discovered reserves of courage and determination they never knew they possessed. In the decades since the war, a new understanding had emerged about humanity's role in the galaxy. They were not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species, but they were perhaps the most difficult to defeat, not just physically, but spiritually. Research conducted by joint xenobiology teams had revealed the physiological foundations of human endurance: more efficient oxygen use, remarkable pain tolerance, and extreme psychological resilience under stress. But these studies also found similar potentials in other species, simply expressed differently or rarely accessed. The greatest legacy of the war was not military doctrine, but cultural exchange. Human concepts of perseverance had been adopted by the Vex. Krell warriors now trained in human martial arts alongside their traditional combat forms. The Lith had embraced human creative expression, producing new art forms that blended their speed with human emotional depth. After the ceremony, Foster, now Ambassador Foster, met with a group of young officers from various species, including his former alien colleagues from the military exchange program so many years before. "They call it the human factor now," said Turl, the Vex officer who had once been astonished by basic training. "The capacity to continue, regardless of odds." "That's flattering," Foster replied, "but not entirely accurate. Every species has this capacity. Humans just evolved in conditions that forced us to access it regularly." "Perhaps," said Kroll, the Krell officer, now a fleet commander. "But you showed us it existed. Before humanity, the Council races specialized, each developing the traits most advantageous to their environment. You reminded us that adaptability itself is the greatest advantage." The Galactic Survey Corps, established after the war, now contained representatives from all allied species, with humans often serving as expedition leaders. These mixed crews explored the farthest reaches of the galaxy, facing unknown dangers, with the combined strengths of their diverse physiologies and perspectives. On the frontier world of Nova Terra, a joint colony founded by humans, Vex, and Krell, children of all three species played together, each learning the other's languages and customs from birth. They would grow up without the cautious hesitation that had marked first contact, instead seeing their differences as complementary rather than threatening. As Foster watched the ceremonial flyover, ships from a dozen worlds moving in perfect formation, he thought about how far they had come from those first wary meetings. "We entered the galactic community as potential threats," he mused to his alien colleagues. "Species built for relentless combat. And now?" asked Mira, the Mer officer who had once been carried through a blizzard by a human who refused to leave her behind. Foster smiled. "Now, we're species built for relentless progress. Together." The galaxy had discovered that humans were indeed built for combat, but also for compassion, for innovation, for endurance beyond reason. And in that discovery, all species had found new potential within themselves. The stars, once barriers, now beckoned as the united races looked outward, ready to face whatever lay beyond with the strength they had forged together. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far more profound. They had changed it, and been changed in return.